Hello again, my friends. We are back. We're back. And today, can you guess what I'm going to say? You think that I'm going to tell you we have a special guest today? Guess what? You're right. All my guests are special, all of them. That's why I invite them. Today's special guest is Mix Puxaplenty, who is a burlesque performer, producer, and sex educator. So some of y'all might know I moonlight as a burlesque performer. I go under the alias American Honey, and in my acts, parody American chauvinism. And my signature act, I wear an American flag bikini and eat an entire Big Mac. The song that I dance to is Honky Tonk Woman by the Rolling Stones. And oh yeah, there's a part where I have all these hot dogs strapped to my hip through my thong, and then I throw those at the audience, and the routine culminates with me dousing myself in a Miller High Life. Oh man, it's so fucking fun. So I performed burlesque for the first time 2.5 years ago. 2.5 years ago. Yeah, I think that's right. In New Orleans, I went through the New Orleans School of Burlesque with Miss Bella Blue, who is fantastic. I think I'll do an entire episode on burlesque and my experience performing burlesque and what it has done for me, how it's changed my life, especially the first time I ever performed, which was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and also one of the absolute most fun experiences of my life. So funny how that often goes hand in hand, since excitement and anxiety are often different sides of the same coin. Both New Orleans and Seattle have really poppin' burlesque scenes. New Orleans, in my experience, has a lot more classic burlesque, some neo-burlesque. So classic is what you would think of as, if you saw the movie Burlesque with Christina Aguilera, that kind of aesthetic, right? Very old school hyper femme glam, which I fucking love. And neo-burlesque is kind of more in the realm of performance art. So I love burlesque so much. I think it's an incredible art form on so many levels. Puxaplenty and I are going to dive into that and dive into also what's going on with the burlesque community and just performing arts in general at this time in this pandemic reality. So when I moved to Seattle, I started going to some burlesque shows. I've probably only been to 6 in Seattle since I moved here, and since, we can't go to live shows anymore. However, there are alternatives, which we're about to learn about. But love the burlesque scene in Seattle. There's a lot more neo-burlesque, nerdlesque, boylesque. Nerdlesque is basically what it sounds like. Burlesque around nerdy cult favorite fiction, graphic novels, shows, etc. So anyway, I saw Mix Puxaplenty at a couple of shows in Seattle, both that they have produced and performed in, and I was wowed. So I invited them onto the podcast to hang out with us today. And I just really am a huge fan of this art form. I wrote an article about the history of burlesque and about the first time I performed it, what that experience was like for me. I think it's called... Don't laugh at me, okay? I think it's called A Fuck You with a Wink, and it can be found at urbandaddy.com. Oh, and just a couple biz updates. We started the Love School for the women's round, and hell yes, we are off to a good start. So I'll be updating you about that. I also have some announcements coming up about different ways. There's a new way to work with me that is upcoming. So keep your little ears peeled on that. Keep your eyes peeled on my Instagram. If you're not following me, it's at the Cora Boyd. And I also want to add, if you want to share this podcast, please do. That would be very helpful for me. Anyone who you feel like would resonate with the content, anything you can do to share this so more people who can benefit from my content and the conversations I'm having, that would be super, super appreciated. So what you can do too is take a screenshot of this episode. Let me know any insights you had, any thoughts you have, and tag me on it. You can post it on your story, tag me on it on Instagram. I always want to know what you're thinking, what your impressions are, etc. So That being said, without further ado, mix pucks aplenty.
Relax. Close your eyes. Take a deep breath.
Welcome to Pillow Talk Radio, the most delicious place to be. On this podcast, we explore how to create more connection, possibility, romance, and magic in love and in life. I'm your host and relationship specialist, Cora Boyd. Are you with me? Welcome, Mix Pucks Aplenty, burlesque performer and sex educator. And I was just looking at your Instagram before this, and I saw mixtress of thickness. And I was like, ooh, that has a rhythm to it. I love it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Hello.
And listeners can't see, but Mix Pucks Aplenty is wearing a phenomenal outfit with a feathery headpiece and an awesome necklace that says, yes, queen. Hell yeah. Wonderful. Well, I'm so excited to get the opportunity to talk to you. I've seen you perform a handful of times in Seattle. I saw you, I think it was Comic-Con. You did you did a Black Panther act. Feels like lifetimes ago. So I'm friends with Al Laikya. So I came to see that performance. And then I've seen you perform too. It's a small club in Ballard.
Was it Substation?
Yes, it was Substation. I think you actually produced that show. There was one act where someone ate an entire pizza.
Oh yeah, that was Champagne Splits, yes.
That was my favorite. That was so good. Awesome. But I'm so excited to get to meet you and just jam out about burlesque, and just curious to hear all about you, and tell me a little bit about your story.
Born in Seattle and raised just outside of Seattle in a little suburb called Kent. Graduated from high school out here and then just kind of wandered around kind of Washington a little bit for a little while, but then ended back up in Renton. And I have lived in Renton now off and on for the last decade or so. I've always been kind of movement inclined. When I was little, I did ballet and tap. My mom tells a very cute story about how I figured out how to work the stereo system and would play Salt and Pepper Push It all the time and just go around saying mush it repeatedly.
Mush it.
Because P's were hard, but M's were easy. Just kind of always been kind of a mover and groover. Artistically inclined. I thought I'd be a writer. That's what I thought I'd end up doing, writing, and I wanted to be a screenwriter. That's what I thought I was going to do with my life. Movement just, it keeps calling to me as a thing that I should be doing, and here I am now.
When did you first perform?
I performed in a talent show in my neighborhood. We had this cute little community center in my neighborhood, and I performed in a talent show to Keep on Walking by CeCe Peniston. So that should date me quite a bit. And my mom has the pictures in a photo album of me performing. I'm wearing a Catwoman t-shirt that I had purchased that I loved very much. And it was specifically Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. So again, dating me quite a bit. So I was probably about 9 years old.
What do you love most about, this is a kind of poetic question, but what do you love most about performing? What's your favorite part? I always feel like I black out a little bit, and it's like I'm not even myself, and I love that. It's so addictive. What do you love about it?
For me, it's a form of mass hypnosis on an audience. It is very much so a way for me to do storytelling. A lot of our history as people is telling stories about where we come from, who we are, all of these different things. And so there is magic in being able to tell whatever story you're trying to tell. I totally get off on this idea of sharing this small piece of myself with this audience and kind of creating this 3 to 5 minute ritual that we can all kind of enjoy and take in, and then it's done. So I definitely think there is lots of power in telling a story.
I love a lot of the language you just used. It's very magical, and the mass hypnosis. It's like you're casting a spell. Tell us about the first burlesque performance and what that was like.
I discovered burlesque as an art form about 10 years ago. I had just had my son. I was watching a documentary on Netflix, and it's called A Wink and a Smile. The really amazing thing about that documentary is it gives you a lot of burlesque history, but there's an A and a B story happening at the same time. And the B story is this burlesque history, but the A story is this Academy of Burlesque. And it just so happened that this Academy of Burlesque was here in Seattle. And so I fell in love and immediately went to my computer to be like, how much does it cost to go to this school? And I'm like, I cannot afford this. I just had a baby. And so every, 6 months for like the better part of 6 years, I would check the website, be like, still can't afford it, still can't afford it. But I started going to kind of the bigger burlesque productions. Specifically, my yearly tradition was going to see the Land of Sweets, which is a nutcracker themed burlesque show. And it wasn't until 6 or so years into like me loving burlesque that I finally took a burlesque teaser class. I kind of got pushed into doing that because I was producing a fundraiser for the Center for Sex Positive Culture here in Seattle, and they wanted a cabaret burlesque style thing. And so I was working with all of these burlesque performers and cabaret performers and helping produce this event, and decided that I wanted to dance on stage. And so I took these drop-in classes so I would make a fool of myself on stage. And so I don't really consider it my first official burlesque performance. I consider my like graduation performance from the Academy of Burlesque as like my first performance, which will be 3 years next week.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
And I hope you're celebrating the anniversary with yourself.
I'm hoping to do that. Lots of sushi.
Lots
yeah.
of sushi. Oh, good. So you performed, you went through the academy. Was that Miss Indigo Blue?
Yeah, did Miss Indigo Blues Academy of Burlesque. I truly believe that we find ourselves in the places that we need to be at the right time. Just like that's just how the universe works. And everything in the universe was trying to like, I think, conspire against me. And I just kind of kept pushing forward. I got a concussion 2 days before this class was supposed to start. Miss Indigo doesn't really teach the Burlesque 101 class anymore. She has a whole group of instructors, but this one in particular, she was co-teaching this one. And I'm like, oh, I need to go. And I'm so glad that I did. I got to work with Miss Indigo and with Ruby Mimosa, who are both atomic bombshells here in the Seattle area, and just amazing, phenomenal performers. This class is probably one of the bigger 101 classes that they had, and like everyone had very interesting story about how the universe kind of just all shoved us into this one space in time, and it's really amazing. I feel really fortunate that our graduating class, so many of us are still actually out here producing content and working together. It's pretty neat because a lot of the Burlesque 101 classes, like after 3 years, it's like 2 folks are still kind of hanging on, and I believe there's like 6 of us that are still fairly active.
So did you go straight into producing as well, or did you perform for a while and then start producing?
My whole thing was, I'm not going to produce, I'm just going to perform. And really, like, the performing thing wasn't even like that big of a thing on my plate. I thought if I did this Burlesque 101, I would do it, I would graduate from it, and I'd be like, it's out of my system, done with it. This had been a thing that had been like pushing at me for like 6 years. I'm like, oh boy. So I did it, and I was like, I did the thing. I feel really good about this. I'm going to kind of step away. And someone approached me, and they're like, hey, there was a producer here at the show. They really liked your act. They have a show coming up, and there's a casting call for it. They mentioned that they would really like you to apply to it. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, thanks. And kind of moved on about my day. I got a message from another producer who was just like, we have a show coming up. It's like legends themed and all of this and like folklore and stuff. Do you have anything? And I'm like, let me think about it. And then there was a giant audition with all of the producers kind of in the Seattle area. And so I'm like, well, maybe I should go do that. So I did that and was still just not quite sure where I was going to fit in all of this. Several people kept talking about this particular show and this particular producer, and they're like, you really need to apply for this show. So I bit the bullet, I applied, and it turns out that show was kind of a big deal. Show is called Bechtel Test Burlesque. And
Oh, like Alison Bechtel? Oh, okay, awesome.
Mhm.
So for anyone listening, Alison Bechtel is a graphic novelist, and the test is to evaluate in a movie, right? Like, tell me if I'm getting this right. To evaluate in a movie if there are 2 female presenting characters in a scene talking about something that's not a man. And it's surprisingly rare.
Yep.
Yeah.
Or whether or not you could replace any female character that's on screen with basically a house plant.
It
It
wouldn't
wouldn't change
change
what
the
happened in
dynamic, right? There's like
yeah,
so little agency that it wouldn't change. Wow.
absolutely.
This
Yeah.
show, was it all scenes from movies, or like how did that work?
It's all media, right? And it's all femme run. All of the acts are about like strong femme characters. It's really, really dope. It was a really cool show. I got to meet someone from the documentary, The Shanghai Pearl. She was the first person of color that I had seen do burlesque. And that was, through this documentary. So being able to be in a show with them was really ridiculous and really kind of like, I was really starstruck. But the show itself was just absolutely amazing. There was like a Jean Grey act, and I love comic books, so like it was really fun to see that. Someone did I think it was a Wonder Woman act in the show. It was lots of really strong femmes just doing the thing. It was really dope. And my act wasn't necessarily media or anything like that. My Burlesque 101 act was a Black Lives Matters act. And they're like, we want this act in the show. Period. End of story. And I'm like, cool. They're like, sometimes superheroes are not just, in comic books, they're actually real people. And so that was really neat to be a part of that show. Again, when I applied for the show, didn't realize like that the show was as big of a deal as it was until like tickets went on sale and the show sells out, in like 3 days. You have Will Wheaton tweeting about this show and you're just like, what am I even involved in? And so that really changed the course of what I thought I was going to be doing in burlesque. And then I found myself producing a couple months after that. It was mostly because representation matters, and a group of us weren't really seeing what we wanted to kind of see out in the burlesque world. And so we're like, let's get together and do a thing. And so we produced 3 shows together. One of those shows was I got to meet Al Lickia actually in that show. Al Lickia is an amazing trans advocate, as well as just an amazing human and trans man, and really freaking funny. And so they actually were that was the first MC I've ever hired for a gig, and it was such a really cool show. It was kind of the spark that I needed to kind of continue pushing down the producing path too.
For anyone listening who has like never been to a burlesque show, I think so. I just started to get curious about it. I moved here from New Orleans like 2 years ago. So I've only seen maybe like 6 shows in Seattle, but I was really blown away by the creativity here and just like conceptually so much cool shit happening. What I love so much about burlesque and why like since I started to get curious about it, get into it, and I've performed maybe like 5 times. So not that many, but enough times where I'm like, oh God, it's like the most liberating thing there is. But the irreverence, like I think that's what I appreciate the most about burlesque culture. It's like the irreverence, and it's like, you don't tell me what sexy is. I get up here and I show you and I tell you. It's that hypnotic spell. Yeah, so that's so cool to hear about. And for anyone who is curious about going to burlesque shows, or like what are some ways that you see the burlesque community and that you are pivoting with the current circumstances with the pandemic, and what are some ways you as a producer are pivoting with that?
It's been a challenge. I mean, basically, we started kind of hearing the rumblings about COVID-19 like end of February-ish, where it really started to kind of get really rumbly. And I had my whole year booked for producing. I was doing a lot of extra traveling for performing for 2020. Like I was producing a festival, co-producing a festival here in Seattle. It was a very full schedule for 2020. And we get into the early part of March, and I was just like, okay, well, I don't think we need to cancel anything quite yet. Like, let's kind of get a feel for it. And that was it. Like March 13th, 14th is when like it just hit the fan.
Yeah.
And it hit the burlesque community really hard. We basically watched 3 months of our potential revenue, our gigs, all of it just kind of evaporated. It was really emotional and really painful because you're mourning your own personal stuff, and then you're watching, like, my feed is very cultivated with lots of burlesque performers. And so I got to witness everyone else's pain. And so it was this group mourning of what are we going to do? And then watching everyone kind of shift and think about not only themselves, but the venues that we perform in. So like, how are we going to help take care of not only ourselves, but take care of, you know, our bartenders and our wait staff at all of these venues. And like,
Yeah.
the community really pulled it together. And then there was this rumbling of, well, we can just do shows online. And my brain immediately started screaming, absolutely not, we cannot do that. And my brain started screaming that because a lot of us are using music that is copyrighted. So how do we take care of ourselves? How do we mitigate that risk? And I'm like, until I understand the full scope of what the risk is, as a producer, I don't feel comfortable. And as a performer, I really don't feel comfortable doing that. And so watching in like the first couple weeks of COVID, watching producers and performers do shows on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and you're just like, this isn't working. 15 seconds into someone doing their act, it gets booted from Instagram or Facebook because
Right. All
you
the
recognize music, right? And so you're like, this is a lot of work. It's a lot of work as a viewer to be able to focus and enjoy this. And I've always been of the opinion that anything that's on Instagram Live or Facebook Live, the way that we consume media, that's not the best place for it, because it's just, you see it, you're like, oh, that's neat. And then you're swiping to the next thing. So it really puts all of this hard work that folks are doing at a huge disadvantage. And if you're trying to monetize that, it doesn't really work either, because again, the way that we're consuming media, we're taking little snacks here and there. We're not sitting down to digest all of this particular format. So I was really cautious about dipping my toe into this. And what ended up happening is a friend of mine in early April reached out and said, hey, I want to produce a digital show. That's all I got. I'm like, no. And she's like, well, I mean, I'm coming to you because you know things. And I'm like, I do know things. I'm like, but this is a lot. And she goes, well, I got a band. And I'm like, you have a band? Nice. So live band.
Cool.
And so I'm like, we can skirt around some issues this way. So I'm like, I'm listening. And she's like, that's all I got. I'm like, well, like, let's do a Zoom call with the band and figure this out. And she goes, yeah, who would you want to approach? I'm thinking I want to kind of keep the cast all people of color. And I'm like, here's a list of some folks. So we got these people together. We did a very long Zoom call because I was like, I cannot commit to any of this unless I know exactly how everything is going to work. And so we sat down and talked about rules and etiquette for our audience. How do we deal with folks who may Zoom bomb a group, and how do we take care of that? Making sure that we had someone in charge of monitoring the room, all of that. It's like, I needed to know all of these bases were covered before I even agreed to doing it. And our first show was amazing. It was pretty close to sold out, and it was live. We had a live band, live performances. We did the band's catalog is what we did. So it was their songs. It circumvented this issue that we had with copyrighted music.
Yeah.
It was really, really neat. We did an encore show of the exact same show the following week. And then we did one other show kind of as this group, where we did kind of a tribute to trip hop and electronica music. And so they tracked down some songs, we all picked some songs, and then we did these acts of these songs. And it was such a cool group to work with. And I think what kind of burned us out more than anything is that it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work to coordinate that. It's a lot of work to get your space in your home ready for that. And this was right at the cusp of the protesting with George Floyd. This was like, we did the trip hop and electronica show, I think about a week or two before shit hit the fan with that. And we all just kind of scrambled to do what we could to support the protests, and burlesque stuff kind of fell to the wayside a little bit there. I've helped with this show. I co-produce a plus size digital burlesque show. So I was noticing that as all these digital shows were popping up, they would have one or no fat burlesque performers. And I'm like, that's not good. We need more body diversity. So there is a fantastic burlesque performer and producer out of Atlanta, Rula Roulette. I reached out to her and said, let's do this. And so we have a show called Between the Sheets, and it's an all plus size burlesque show. It's pre-recorded, which is kind of another fun twist on this. So all of the acts come in, we edit them together as a video, or we do our intros and outros from home, and then we have a 45 to 60 minute show that we do like a live streaming of, where you can get a Q&A with the co-producers and the performers, and then we also have it available as a rental for 3 days. And so we've been doing that since May. And so we do it every other month so that we are not burning the candle at both ends. And
That's
it's
so
really
smart.
exciting.
So smart. And I love what you were saying too, of like with having to pivot with digital, which obviously is a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
And also what you were saying around like how we consume media on Instagram, for example, and like not to mention all the censorship that's been happening on Instagram. But I feel like the beauty of a burlesque show too is that it's the tension, it's the anticipation, it's the patience that you have to have as the audience. That doesn't work if you're like, oh, how can I get this little Scooby snack real quick? It's just not conducive. Unforeseen benefit sounds like collaborating across distance.
Yes.
If you're like, whoa, there's this really awesome person in Atlanta that I admire and have wanted to work with, and here's how we can do this at this time. Or like, obviously tons of shitty things going on. Like we're trying our best to be humans, and that's really cool how you've gotten so creative with that.
Absolutely. I also joined forces with 5 other producers all over the country and 1 internationally, and we did a burlesque festival. So it was all digital. It's called Sequence and Sequestered. And it was a labor. Like we started that at the end of March, and we just finally went live with it, I believe 2 weeks ago, because we had 6 producers, all over the world. One of our producers, Freaky Candy, she's based out of Italy. And so Italy was like 6 weeks ahead of where we were at in the US in terms of outbreak and trying to social distance and quarantine and all of that. So she was our future, basically. And it was really, really hard for all of us. We were really gung-ho about the show, and then trying to live our everyday lives and then come together to do this. But we finally were able to release it. We had amazing prizes for our performers, and it was really just this project that meant a great deal to us. There were so many burlesque festivals that had to cancel, and the idea of taking these 2-3 day events and condensing them into some type of digital format just doesn't make a lot of sense for a lot of folks, and especially depending on the size of the festival. It's too many people to deal with, and all of us are using Zoom and all these different things all day anyway for other things.
So it's like the last thing you want to be doing.
Watch 3 hours of a burlesque festival 3 nights in a row. That's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it is interesting how we're all so zoomed out, and it's like it is socializing, but it's
exhausting.
It doesn't, it drains because it doesn't re-energize. That's how it feels. So you mentioned also kind of like very small live shows, or do you think maybe there might be like socially distanced amphitheater outdoor shows or anything like that in the future?
Right now, one of the things I'm doing is I'm working with a couple of different venues in the Seattle area. How do we do these hybrid models of what if I had 8 performers and they had time slots of when they came in fully ready to go? All they had to do is throw on their costume in the background, in the green room, perform, and then they can head out, and we can just kind of keep rotating them out. So that's something that we've been working on. There is a really awesome group. 3 Burlesque performers actually came together. Faggy Randy here in Seattle, Samsonite at BC, New York, and Pinot Noir. They came together and they decided they are going to do a tour through the Pacific Northwest, and it's an outdoor burlesque event, and it's called Bus Top. And they're currently in the works of raising money to make this happen. And it's really kind of a nifty idea, this idea of having a bus that doubles as a stage.
Oh, so
And
they're on like literally on top of the, oh, they're like a
yeah,
traveling players ensemble of yore. That's
yeah,
amazing.
it's so good. And that's what
Yeah.
they're working towards right now. And I'm like all on board with this idea. So I think we're
Yeah.
going to see things like that. And I also think that this idea of mini consumption. So
Yeah.
I work really hard to make sure that some of the digital stuff that I'm putting out and co-producing, I like a sweet spot between 40 minutes and an hour, I think is enough. And the thing is that your market is now exploded. It's expanded because it is digital.
Right.
And I think that as we keep working through how to make all this work, we've had folks for years asking for live streams of shows and things like that, because access to some of these venues that we perform in all over the country are not wheelchair accessible at all. People have sensory issues, and it's
With
too
lighting.
loud. We're now in a position where we can offer access, accessible access to burlesque and to drag to folks that have been wanting to come and be a part of this for so long, and we can now do that. And we now know ways that we can make this happen. So I think even in a post-COVID, we're over the hump world, digital art of this form shouldn't disappear because there is a market for it. And there are
Yeah.
people that really want to be able to contribute
Yeah.
and be a part of it. We have venues in Seattle where they're accessible to everybody but the performer.
Mm.
So if you have a performer that has accessibility issues, it's like, well, you could perform from the audience,
Right.
and that's like it's not great. It's not
Yeah.
great. It's not ideal, and that's not inclusive.
You're really smart to like add a interactive element into the events, because I feel like that's a really good way to mitigate for the Zoom can feel like a little bit passive. It's like,
Yeah.
here I am by myself again.
Yep.
Right, but like to make it interactive and to like bring that into it and have the opportunity for people to actually get to talk to the performers and for the performers to feel too, because I feel like as a performer it's that energy we're talking about, like feeding
Yeah.
off of the energy, feeding off of the little whoop. What you're saying too with Zoom bombers, I did a couple digital party events and I had some Zoom bombers come and I was like, I didn't even realize that was a thing. The benefit of the digital landscape is how it does, as you said, it makes it so much more accessible. And collaborations in Italy or, across
Yeah.
oceans, that's really cool. And recognizing that, as always with burlesque, it needs to feel like a safe environment for the performers. And with the internet, as we know, like there are some dweebs roaming around just passing time by being assholes. So like
Yep.
that's so smart to have basically a bouncer as you would at a show. For anyone listening who is either already a burlesque fan or is now, based on this conversation, what are some best ways that people can support the burlesque community right now?
There are so many digital shows happening right now. Definitely look on Facebook. There's a group, I think it's virtual burlesque events, and it's open. That's like a public group that's open, and it has a bunch of listings for burlesque events. I mean, type in burlesque events and the city that you're in into Facebook and see what pops up. There's a lot. I know that a lot of burlesque producers have switched over to using Eventbrite and TicketLeap. So you can always search TicketLeap or Eventbrite to see what burlesque gigs are there. Those are like the best way. A lot of us have really awesome merch, like real sexy stuff. So I would encourage you, if there's burlesque performers that you love and you're like, you're so dope, they probably got stickers. They probably have a shirt. They have something. If you see these shows popping up on your feed and like you're like, I can't go, share the event. Facebook has worked its ass off to bury our Facebook events and has actually looped burlesque into the Fosna Cessna debacle. So we have been considered adult work, adult entertainment. And so Facebook won't allow us to purchase ads. They will delete our events if the copy's too racy. There's a lot kind of going on. So
Yeah.
if you know burlesque performers, follow them, share their shows. There's a a type of burlesque for every single person. I truly believe that you can find one style of burlesque, one type of burlesque show that speaks to you as a person. There's way too much for you to just be like, I hate burlesque.
What you're saying about merch too, it's like a thing to realize is any burlesque artist, it's like there's costuming, there's the aesthetic, there's the movement piece, there's the political messages. There's so much that goes into this. It really, I think it really can become a way of life. And that's so evident. It's like you're just oozing burlesque. So do you have any tips for anyone who wants to bring a little bit more burlesque into their daily life? Whether that's in their private relationship with themselves or like their intimate partnership.
Right now is the time to do it. There are academies of burlesque all over the country, and they are all teaching online classes right now in all different types of price points and like intro stuff. I highly recommend an Art of the Tease class. And the first burlesque class I took was How to Strip for Your Lover. That was a class I took. It was a lot of fun, and it's still something to this day, even when I'm just kind of being silly and trying to like get a partner to come upstairs with me. I will suggestively pull my shirt over my shoulder and kind of look over and be like, hey, look at this. This is very sexy part of the skin here. This section here is very nice.
Yeah.
Follow me. Let's go. There's so many instructors right now who are teaching different types of things. So if you've ever even had an inkling of wanting to try burlesque, you can do it from the comfort of your own home and your own space right now and take some classes. Also, if you're trying to get into burlesque, I think the best advice I can give you is watch lots of it. Consume it with your eyeballs. It's so important. The next burlesque show that I have coming up is on August 22nd. It's called No Closet Follies. It's a BDSM and kink themed burlesque show. We're in our third year of it, so it's No Closet Follies Volume 3. And our headliner for that is Egypt Black Nile, based out of California. She has the most burlesque titles in the world. She just goes to burlesque festivals and just snatches crowns. She's amazing. And she's also a sex educator as well. So dope. One of our featured performers based here in Seattle, the Luminous Pariah, is in this show.
God, I love the name. The burlesque names are so great.
It's so good.
So good.
It's really good. And so this show is one of these hybrid shows that I'll be doing. So all the performers, except 2 of them, will be performing at the Rendezvous in Seattle.
I do my events there too. I love the Rendezvous.
Love the Rendezvous. Love the staff there. The show is going to be like so dope. So the performers will come and do their act. We'll live stream it into Zoom. I think we have like 6 Seattle-based performers, including a duet from an Olympia duo, Vanessa the Witch and Rainy Day. So I'm like really stoked about this show. Like I said, this is our 3rd year of doing this show. It's a fundraiser for my production company. My production company, Production, is fiscally sponsored by Shun Pike. So any donations made to Productions is a tax write-off, which is super duper great. And so we're raising money for Production so that we can continue to hire marginalized performers and pay them what they're worth. That is our goal, and that's what we strive to do.
I'm curious too. I know for myself, after I performed the first time, I feel like some sort of seal was broken sexually, where I was just like, whoa, I am way more confident asserting my needs. And you mentioned another performer. You're a performer and sex educator, and you mentioned another one who is as well. Like it goes so hand in hand. Do you think a lot of the burlesque community are also sex educators?
There are so many intersections in burlesque. I think most burlesque performers are feminists for sure. And I think that we're all teachers. We're all students here in life. So I know for a fact though that like I'm surrounded by a lot of sex educators and teachers in the burlesque realm. Miss Brookhouse, an amazing educator and performer and producer and all the things. Maggie McMuffin, she teaches. Like there's just all these overlaps of different subcultures that we're involved in, and that burlesque is like this interesting pivoting point. I was heavily involved in the kink and BDSM scene in Seattle before I even got involved in burlesque. I think that my involvement in that community made me more confident and like gave me that extra boost I've been, butt naked in the middle of the dungeon. This is nothing. Let's do this.
Yeah.
This is just like a normal day. Let's go. And so like, it's been really nice to be able to like watch how these two very big parts of my life kind of weave and intersect with each other. We have tech support at venues and the tech crews, and you're like, oh, these people are involved in like the comic community and the nerd community, and these people are involved in the BDSM community, and these people all used to do derby, and these people are part of the pinup community, and so there's all these different things, and they just all kind of intersect in this other subculture. And I think that burlesque is as much an art form as it is a culture.
Yeah, amen. That is a wonderful closing statement. It's a medium where you can express so many things through. Well, I'm so happy and thankful that you spent some time with me today, and I will be linking those shows and upcoming shows, and definitely will be there. So much admiration for you and how you have been able to pivot with a lot of grace, and like sounds like you're really teasing out so many of the benefits. And it's also kind of fun to see the interior of different people's homes and learn a little bit more of, like, that's another kind of intimacy to bring in. Thank you so much. While you have a captive audience, any final thoughts or just anything you wish more people knew or would want to relay to more people?
If you have the time, check out these digital burlesque shows. These are the lifeline for a lot of artists. The thing is that, like, I know that we've all been kind of racked hard by COVID. There wasn't really a lot in the way of safety net for artists themselves, especially full-time artists. A lot of the full-time artists I know that applied for UI and all of that, they still haven't gotten it. They're still pending, and a lot of us applied for that stuff back in March. So $10 to watch a 45-minute to 60-minute burlesque show or drag show. That's us taking care of each other and being able to have some escape from what is happening and enjoy some art. I firmly, truly believe that art tells a story. It tells a story and it keeps us going. It keeps us moving forward. And it's so very important that we elevate artists, because as we've seen over and over and over again, that some of the things that survive the fall of civilization is art. Let's keep making art.
I'm really hoping that, as you said, this is what makes life worth living, is like how we create meaning from our experiences through expression and understand each other better through hearing each other's expression of that. And like, we really need to be monetarily compensating artists.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm feeling hopeful that with all of these shifts happening, that more people are really going to start being more intentional about, like, hey, if we're not supporting art, radio stations, like all these things that we love that make our life better with our dollars, they're going to go away. So we got to do that now and moving forward. Thank you so much. It was so wonderful to meet you. And thanks for being you. Keep doing it.
Thank you. You too. I really appreciate this opportunity. It's great. And this was lovely talking to you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Pillow Talk Radio. I'm Cora Boyd, and make sure to subscribe so we can keep you in the loop. In the interim, you can find me on Instagram at @TheCoraBoyd, YouTube Cora Boyd, website CoraBoydCoaching.com. Have an excellent rest of your day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are, and we'll catch you next week.